Every country has an energy, and that energy rewires you whether you notice it or not. People move to Japan and become minimal. People move to Mexico and their entire relationship with time softens. People move to New York and suddenly they can't sit still. Your personality is far more malleable than you think. You're not just the average of the 5 people closest to you. You're the average of the 5 places, the 5 routines, and the 5 inputs you're exposed to most. Every space you occupy is voting on who you become. I read this post the other day by Trish Ray, and it completely stopped me in my tracks because I feel like so often we want to change ourselves, right? We want to improve, we want to have new habits and routines and get better. And then we go back into the same apartment in the same city with the same friends, the same group chat, the same Instagram feed, and we wonder why nothing sticks, why nothing changes. Because the thing is, whether we realize it or not, our environment is shaping our life. It's designing our life. It has such a huge impact that I feel like we still don't really fully realize, and that also we still don't fully take advantage of, because this is, of course, so powerful. And that's exactly why in today's episode, I want to dive super deep with you into the different layers of environment and what we can actively do to kind of really design it in a way that it helps us become the highest potential future versions of ourselves, like really the versions of ourselves we want to become, and what is possible for us. So let's kind of start big with the city we live in, which for so many people, I think really is just kind of where we live, where it's not even really questioned that much, because maybe it's where we grew up or where we got a job or went to study and then we stayed there, where we maybe met someone, got married, whatever it is. And that's then just kind of how it is. But wow, I was really so mind blown when I started researching this, and I can't wait to share with you what I learned, because urban psychology research shows that the city we live in actively shapes our personality, our stress levels, our creativity, our ambition, and even our mental health, because our brain adapts to its surroundings through a process that's called environmental encoding. So the brain is constantly like looking at our surroundings and taking it in, and then making our behavior dependent on that. And so the architecture, the pace, the noise level, the population density, the weather, the culture, all of that feeds into our nervous system and changes how we feel, what we think, also what we think is possible for ourselves, and influences us in such an impactful way. And I'm so sure you've also experienced this, right? When you travel somewhere, a new city or country, and you get there and you feel suddenly so inspired or motivated, or just this feeling of, oh my God, anything feels possible here. Just these big feelings that cities can kind of really evoke in you. I definitely have this so much in New York, or also Berlin has this effect on me. I used to live a few months in Berlin, and wow, I really felt like a different person living there. And everything literally felt possible, and I felt so much more inspired. But so especially, of course, in terms of living somewhere, one of the probably most obvious ways it influences us is our stress levels, which makes so much sense, right? Because if you live in a place that is very loud, very high paced, very, very high population density, it automatically just increases our cortisols, our stress levels go up so much more compared to a place where there is maybe a lot of green area, it's a lot calmer, maybe not so many cars, you have a lot of parks, water, whatever. That then automatically, of course, calms us and lowers our cortisol levels. But here's where I feel like it gets really interesting, because it goes so much further than stress. Because what it also really influences is our ambition, what we think is possible for ourselves, the standards we set for ourselves, kind of how big we allow ourselves to dream. And that's so interesting to think about, right? That the city we live in has a direct impact on that. And I experienced that, like I just said, for example, with living in Berlin, but also when we moved to Dubai. So in 2020, I moved to Dubai for the first time with my husband. And around that time, I had actually started with social media. And I really wanted to start uploading yoga videos on YouTube. But I was so scared of it, and so much standing in my own way and talking myself out of it. Also posting on Instagram, I was still like in the very beginning stages. And then we moved to Dubai, and as soon as we were there, it was literally like kind of barrier was a little bit broken down, and I felt so much more comfortable with kind of putting myself out there and kind of taking that risk, or just having that courage of uploading videos and just filming and putting it out there. And I am so convinced that it had so much to do with that move, because all of a sudden we were in this new environment where, first of all, of course, I think a huge role is definitely also always when you don't really know anyone and when you're so far away from everyone you know, because that's kind of always the main thing holding us back also, right? Is what will people think about this? But then being so far away, but then also just being in this city that feels so vibrant and where people follow their dreams and where so many people move also to build businesses, to follow their goals, to take risks. And when you are surrounded by that, it does automatically trickle over onto you. And that was so crazy for me to see really what a difference it made on where we're living, on how willing I kind of like was to put myself out there and also to dream bigger for myself. And this is, by the way, a very real phenomenon. Economists call it the peer effect of place. Your income, career trajectory, health habits, and even your creativity are statistically influenced by the city you live in. Not just because of opportunities, but because of the ambient standards around you. You unconsciously calibrate your goals to match what you see. Crazy, right? Thinking about it, if everyone around you has a 9-to-5 job, after that they go home, sit in front of the TV, then they go to bed, maybe they don't work out as much, they are very like set in the way they do things, they don't really think further ahead. That is the exact standard that you are gonna also live up to, because that's what you're exposed to, that's what you see. So even if you're super ambitious, you're still not gonna strive for more because you don't see it. It's not normal, right? So the kind of that level of what is normal is somewhere completely different compared to maybe living somewhere where everyone is thinking super much outside of the box and wanting to do things differently, or you live somewhere where people are super active. I think somewhere I would actually really love to live is Australia, because I've heard now so many times how health conscious people are there, and how they're also so like morning people, where they, not to say that I'm a huge morning person, but where they're working out in the morning and at the beach and outside, and so super focused on their health and moving so much and so on. And when you then live there, that's then automatically what is the normal for you and the standard for you, and then automatically influencing you in your behaviors and your thinking. And one more thing, that of course also every city has its own energy, and that energy becomes your energy. So again, living in a very fast-paced city, let's say New York, where everything is really, really fast and just a lot also, that then becomes your energy as well. And if you're someone who needs that, who needs to be stimulated and have a lot going on and kind of really needs that outside force, then that's amazing, right? But if you're someone who easily gets anxious and maybe who needs more calmness, then that could probably be the worst place to live in, right? So that's also to say that there's not one thing better than the other. It's so individual, of course, also from person to person, what your goals are, what kind of person you are. And with that, basically the conclusion is that we want to find the place that fits ourselves and the aspirations we have for ourselves and the goals we have for ourselves the best, right? Which obviously is a million times easier said than done, because not that easy to just move country. Like I said, unfortunately, not really feasible right now for me to move to Australia, even though I would love to do that. But of course, we're kind of limited with options there. But definitely, if you have the chance, or let's say if you are unhappy where you live and you can really feel that the place does not serve you and your goals, do whatever you can to move, because I really think life is too short to live in a place that you hate. And also coming from someone who has moved crazy much the last years, I really swear to you, it does make such an insane difference. Because for example, another place where we lived where I could feel it so crazy much was Hamburg in Germany. And I want to say right away that I love Hamburg. I think it's the most stunning city, so beautiful. I have so amazing friends living there also. But when we were living there, it was insane for me to see my like internal state And yeah, I mean, you also need to be careful to not only make it dependent on the city and like blame the city for everything. That's definitely also not the purpose. But it was just interesting for me to see how much less ambitious I felt, or actually more kind of how stuck I felt. Really just this feeling of, I don't even really know what I'm doing, and just constantly trapped in this overthinking cycle that I kind of knew what I wanted to do, but then just standing in my own way so crazy much. And it was just interesting to see compared to then living in Dubai, where I felt like, wow, I was really getting fully in my power somehow. And again, could maybe also have other reasons playing into it, but I feel like especially when also looking at the research, and just also makes so much sense, right? And it's going to make even more sense with the next points that we're going to talk about, because now let's zoom in a little bit to our home, which obviously is a place where we spend so crazy much time, where we sleep, we eat, we relax, we learn, we chill, we have maybe friends over, all of these things. Most of all, it's also the place where our habits live. So there's a concept in behavioral psychology called cue-dependent behavior. So our brain doesn't run habits based just on willpower or motivation, but it runs them based on environmental cues. So it's the cue in our environment that triggers the behavior, and not our intention or our discipline. It's the space. And someone who writes about this so brilliantly is James Clear in his book Atomic Habits, where he writes, "Your environment is the invisible hand that shapes human behavior." And that's exactly why we snack in front of the TV even though we're not even really hungry, or why we scroll in bed before falling asleep, because it's the bed that cues that behavior, and it's the couch and the TV that cues the snacking. And there's this research from Wendy Wood at USC that found that around 43% of our daily behaviors are habitual. So they are performed in the same context, in the same location, triggered by the same environmental cues. So that means that almost half of our life is running on autopilot based on our environment. So we're not choosing our behavior, but our space is choosing the behavior for us. And taking this in, obviously, this makes it so clear just how powerful this is, right? Because this means we can shape our environment so that we basically don't even really need any willpower anymore if we design it in a way that the habits we want to do become supernatural and super automatic. And the first thing, of course, is that we want to make the things that we want to do visible. So putting our running shoes out, having the healthy food in the fridge, having a book on our bedside table. And there's another super interesting study that James Clear also writes about in his book, where in a cafeteria, they moved all the unhealthy drinks to the back and put water in the front, and then seeing how drastically that changed purchase behavior and how much more people chose the healthy option with the water instead of the unhealthy drinks, just because it was more visible. So that was the only change they did, and we want to use that. So any habit that you want to implement, make it as visible as possible. And then, of course, the reverse as well. With any habit you want to break, we're moving it out of sight, making it really hard for ourselves, because the brain always wants to take the easy way, right? It hates friction. So whatever kind of really is easy right now, that's then what we're going to do. And so making the things we don't want to do as hard as you possibly can, and thinking about all the creative ways you can implement this into your life. So really going through your home and observing it and asking yourself, what kind of person does my environment help me become? Or who does this turn me into? The way kind of my apartment is set up, and being really strict with ourselves there. Also, for example, I have this huge rule. I would never ever have a TV in bedroom. Never, because it's so tempting, right, to then just turn it on. Or also leaving my phone out of the bedroom, which I've struggled so much with in the past, but can feel like, wow, what a crazy difference it does make. Because otherwise, the first thing I'm doing in the morning is go on Instagram. It's just completely automatic. And we need to take control there of these behaviors and shape them in the way that serves us. Now, we have all heard the quote, we are the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. We've heard this a gazillion times, but the neuroscience behind this is really so fascinating. I'm so sure you maybe already have heard about a system called mirror neurons. So our brain fires up these mirror neurons, not just when we do an action ourselves, but also when we see someone else doing that action. So when someone, for example, gets hurt, we flinch. Or, best example, when someone yawns, we feel like yawning as well. Or it's also the reason why we feel more anxious when we are around someone who is anxious, or calmer when we are with someone who's very calm. And so that means that the mirror neurons don't just mimic actions, but also states. So our energy, emotions, standards. So when you spend time with someone who is highly ambitious, your brain mirrors that ambition. Same thing when you're with someone who complains all the time, then your brain mirrors that negativity. So it's not a choice, it's an automatic thing that happens. Our brain really is a social sponge. It absorbs the behaviors, the emotional states, the beliefs, the standards of the people around us, whether we're aware of it or not. We don't have to agree with someone to be influenced by them. We simply have to be in the same room as them. Then there's also a theory in neuroscience called social baseline theory, which argues that the human brain is fundamentally designed to operate in a social context. So our brain doesn't take in our environment in isolation, but always in context with whoever is around us. So if we are, for example, with someone who really lifts us up and believes in us and is super positive, then we view challenges in a much more doable way. So then kind of climbing the mountain seems much more realistic when we're with someone who feels safe and supportive. Instead, of course, when we're surrounded with people who drain us, who criticize us, who maybe make us feel unsafe, then we view these challenges in a completely different way. Then everything feels much less doable, and we perceive threats much more intensely also, and everything literally feels so much harder, and our stress response is so much more sensitive, and we burn more cognitive energy just managing the social environment, which then leaves less space for actual growth. So what this means is that the people around us are literally changing how we perceive the world. Now, we already talked about how contagious standards are in terms of the city we live in, but I just want to point it out one more time because I find it so important to always remember that the people we surround ourselves with, especially the ones we surround ourselves with the most, they do set the standards for our life because they kind of determine what is normal, right? Because if we are surrounded by people who constantly settle, who don't strive for more, who maybe don't take care of their health or whatever it is, that becomes the normal because our brain defines that as the baseline and will unconsciously aim for that even if we consciously want more. I really find this so fascinating and I think about this all the time, and I have a super good example in my life because it's still also insane to me thinking back what a crazy impact my husband had and still has on my life, which is of course super nice, that I feel like he shaped my life in such a crazy positive way and helped me become someone I never thought possible. And he really made me believe in myself so much more, dream so much bigger, because I remember so clearly the very first time I met him on our first date. I actually told him a little bit about, because there I hadn't done any social media yet. I had just done my first teacher training, my first yoga teacher training, and had this dream of sharing my practice and filming it and creating content around it and like putting myself out there with it. And for him, like when I talked about that with him, he made it sound like the most normal thing ever to do that. And he was really like, but why are you not already doing it? And kind of talking about it in a way where I felt like, wow, this is actually really possible. And then also hearing what he's doing and what he's working on, it opened kind of my worldview of what is possible so much, because he just had a completely different mindset around things and was so like thinking so much bigger than I ever kind of dared to. And just from spending time with him, it's crazy how I can see that like where I am now, I really have to say is mostly up to him, or mostly because of him, because I know for a fact that I would never have been able, I would never be sitting here right now sharing this podcast episode, sharing also more vulnerable things about my life and all these things and being okay with that. I would never do that in a million years if I hadn't met him and if I wasn't with him. So yeah, that's just crazy, right? How much the people around us shape us. And I want to say one more thing on this that blew my mind, because research on social networks found that behaviors spread through social connections like a contagion, up to 3 degrees of separation. So if your friend's friend starts exercising, your likelihood of exercising goes up. If someone in your extended network gains weight, you're at a higher risk of gaining weight too. Your behavior isn't just influenced by the people you know, it's influenced by the people they know. So I feel like it's formulated in a very drastic way, but there is research on it. And I think, yeah, crazy, right? So crazy. But of course, now the question is, how can we build a social environment that helps us reach our goals and become our best selves and not kind of keep us stuck? And the first thing always is, of course, to create awareness. So auditing your social circle first and foremost, and noticing, first of all, who are actually the people that you spend the most time with, and then what influence do they have on you? What life are they living? How do you feel also after spending time with them, right? That's the most powerful indicator always also is, do you feel low in energy? Do you feel drained? Do you feel maybe more pessimistic also after spending time with someone, or the exact opposite? Do you feel really uplifted? Do you feel super inspired and like you can take on the world after you spend time with someone? Oh my God, those are my favorite people in the world. When you spend time with them and afterwards you just feel like, wow, I feel like I can do anything now. That's just really the best. And then it's not about just cutting everything off that you feel like doesn't serve you, but maybe realizing and having that awareness that I also truly believe that there are certain people for certain seasons in your life, and that some friendships were really essential for who you were, but they're maybe not as essential for who you are now, and that it's also completely normal to outgrow friendships. That does happen, but we don't have to leave these people, but maybe we can be a bit more intentional of how much access someone gets to us, and or like how much time we spend with someone, because then coming to the next step, with the people where you know, oh my God, this person brings so much joy in my life or lifts me up so much, or I feel so inspired with that person, to spend more time with them, and maybe then really investing more in those relationships and being conscious of that and more mindful around that. So instead of cutting someone off, maybe just focusing your energy more towards the relationships that you really want to nourish and want to deepen. But then, of course, I know one of the biggest problems is that sometimes we don't have these people in our lives, right? And we maybe don't have the people that we want to become like. And there, it sounds so obvious, I know, but you have to go to places where these people are, because most people just don't do that. It's so obvious, but then if you, for example, want to be more creative, then sign up for workshops, go to art galleries, go to culture meetings, or whatever there is around you, like really putting research into that and then going these places. Or if you want to be more entrepreneurial, maybe finding a co-working space where you can go, or startup meetings, or any kind of gathering where you can be surrounded by that. So actively putting yourself into rooms where these people are. If you want to become healthier, if you want to work out more, signing up for a gym and then going regularly, maybe making friends there, maybe finding accountability groups or running clubs, or there is so much. I really think for whichever interest you have or whatever you want to become, there's 1,000% a group out there, even if it's online. Just signing up for that, maybe then being in a WhatsApp group chat with someone. And the thing to remember is that you do not have to show up as the best person in the room, but you have to show up as the most curious one, because the research on proximity is just really so clear that we absorb the standards of the rooms we're in. Put yourself in rooms where the standard is higher than your current one. And do not forget that we can, of course, also use this aspirational proximity with people we've never met, with people who are maybe famous, or people we genuinely aspire to be like. we can find them online, right? And we can find content online, and then it's just about consuming that and exposing yourself to it. In my opinion, has the exact same effect as being with someone in person if you listen to them. And if you can just take it in, and that's for sure what I have to say has shaped me by far in the past, that I have just been consuming so much content of people that I want to be like, and that have maybe done something that I really, really aspire to do as well, or that just in general really inspires me. And one of the best examples I have is that whenever I listen to an interview with Miranda Kerr, I feel like I want to become the healthiest person in the world. And I feel so much more motivated and driven and inspired to take care of my health and do the healthy things even when I don't feel like doing them, because she is so crazy health focused, and it's insane what an impact it has on me just listening to her. So for anyone who doesn't know her, she's the founder of Cora Organics, which is also one of the most amazing skincare brands, because it uses only fully certified organic products or ingredients, and that's really rare to find. And love everything she does, and someone that I'm so inspired by, and that I feel like I gain so much from kind of exposing myself to her or being close to her through the content she shares, or through whatever kind of something else to think about, especially with relationships where you maybe feel unsure about how much does this really serve me, or where you feel like you maybe constantly fall into the same patterns. When you spend time with that person, you maybe always end up gossiping or talking about things that drain you or something like that. If that relationship is still really important to you, to talk about these things and to inspire growing together. So talking about what your goals are and what you're striving to do and maybe what you want to achieve. And then asking that person, are you willing to work on that with me? So are you willing to, whenever we spend time, that we also talk about other topics, or we do certain things together? And just in general, asking them if they're willing to grow with you and kind of put effort into that. And then, I mean, from the response, you already know, okay, is this a relationship I want to hold on to? Or maybe it's not, right? Maybe it's not. And that's sometimes a really hard realization, but I think also kind of part of life. And there, in that regard, also, I think really important part of life is that your energy is yours and you have to protect it, because it's one of the most valuable resources we have, right? And we want to treat it like the most valuable thing. So really asking yourself, what am I spending energy on? Or like, who am I spending energy on? Is that really worth it? And you are not allowed to be made felt guilty. Like, other people are not allowed to guilt trip you when you are protecting your energy. When you are, for example, canceling plans or not showing up as much because you know it doesn't serve you, that is your total right. So do not feel guilty about that. This is such a big reminder to myself. Like, basically everything I share with you in this podcast is always like the first receiver is myself for the things that I say, because it's something I struggle with so much. And I want to remind myself also right now of how we owe it to ourselves to especially protect our nervous system, and just being deliberate about that. Coming to the last chapter, which is also my favorite one, because I think it's the one where we can really take the most control over, or where we can really do the most about, because with the city we live in or the people around us, it can be really tricky, right, to actively change it or shape it. But with our mental environment, I feel like there are really no excuses, because we really have so much control over who we follow on social media, which books we read, what we listen to, what we watch on TV. That's really like totally in our control. And I listened to an interview with James Clear the other day, and he said something. I had to write it down because I thought he really hit it on the nail so much. Because he said, almost every thought you have is downstream from what you consume. When you choose which account to follow, which book to read, which podcast to listen to, you're literally choosing your future thoughts. So we directly impact what we think about by what we consume. And our thoughts then in turn, of course, have the biggest impact on everything else. So if we can really kind of target that point, I believe we can change our lives so crazy much, because the thing is also that our brain doesn't distinguish between real experience and consumed experience the way we think it does. So when you watch someone's Day in My Life on YouTube, your mirror neurons fire as if you're living it. When you scroll through highlight reels on Instagram, your brain processes those images as social comparison data and adjusts your self-worth accordingly. That's crazy, right? And also when you read a book, the neural patterns activated in your brain closely mirror the patterns that would activate if you were living the events described, because your brain was simulating the experience. So when people say, oh, it's just social media or it's just a show, no, it's not. It's an experience that our brain processes as a real thing. And it is shaping our beliefs, our emotional baseline, our standards, and what we think is possible for ourselves. But what I think is actually the most important point here is the whole thing around comparison, because our brain evolved in small groups of people. So being surrounded by maybe 50 to 100 people. But now, in today's world, of course, we are exposed to almost every single person in the world, right, through social media. But what we see is that curated version, that highlighted, the perfected picture that a lot of people put out there. And our ancient brain doesn't know the difference. So it doesn't know kind of what is real, what is curated. It cannot differentiate between that, even if we consciously know. Unconsciously, we just unfortunately really don't. So our brain runs this comparison algorithm, which it's naturally designed to do, but in a much smaller group. But now it does it and just automatically, of course, concludes, yeah, I'm behind. I'm not good enough. And that's exactly why you can have a great day and then feel absolutely terrible after 20 minutes of scrolling, because your brain just literally ran 200 social comparisons in 20 minutes. And that's more comparisons than our great-great-grandmother made in a single year. And the conclusion, of course, are two things. First of all, reducing the time we spend online and on social media as much as possible. I have to say, if I wasn't doing Instagram as a job, I would totally delete it. I would for sure still use YouTube, because I feel like YouTube is such a different experience you make, because it is so much more real, and you really, especially if you watch lifestyle vlogs or whatever, that you see. So it's still, of course, it's still oftentimes a bit curated, but it's a million times more real, and you can learn so much and get so inspired by it than, in my opinion, on other social media channels. So maybe reducing the time, but definitely also being so much more mindful around who do we follow, and really asking yourself with every single account that you follow, how does this content make me feel? And I think though it's tricky, because you still get exposed to so much content that you're not following, right? Not even if you're just on the Explore feed, but like in your normal feed, right? There's so much content from just, people you don't know, you haven't chosen to follow, and then you still get exposed to it. So that, in my opinion, really, it's a pro and con side, of course, with everything. It's not black and white, because you can, of course, also get so crazy inspired from it and learn also on Instagram and TikTok. And it can have such a positive effect. But I think it requires a lot of effort from our side to teach the algorithm exactly what to show you, and to filter for that content that really uplifts you and maybe teaches you something, or makes you become better. Because that is, of course, also the good news about this whole thing, that it works the opposite effect as well, right? That we can use this so much to our power, to be so selective about what we consume, that it gets so much easier becoming who we want to be. And again, that it requires so much less willpower or discipline to reach our goals if we expose ourselves to the things that bring us actively closer to these goals. So apart from social media, looking, of course, also at the podcasts we listen to, the shows we watch, literally any little thing you consume, remembering what a huge impact it has, and especially also keeping in mind that the first hour and the last hour in our day is the most important to really be kind of careful or intentional, because that's just where our brain is the most receptive, and where we're in this brain state where, especially also with our subconscious mind, it takes in things much deeper. So there, let's definitely commit to be especially intentional and also to reach more towards the long form content, because long form, like books, podcasts, documentaries, create deeper neural encoding than short form content. So a single book can rewire more of our thinking than 1,000 reels. Now, I know this was a lot, but if there's only one thing you take away from this episode, I want it to be this: that we have so much more power and control than we think, and that we need to really make use of that, because so often we just kind of end up in a city, we end up in an apartment, we end up in a job, and then it gets familiar, and once it's familiar, it's really hard to kind of get out of it, because the brain hates to be in unfamiliar territory. So even if it's good or bad, doesn't matter, familiar is what the brain loves. So it can be really challenging. But if you, for example, really have this inner calling that something doesn't feel right about the city you live in, or the apartment you live in, or the job you're in, or a person you have around you, I really urge you to do whatever you can to change it. Because so often we think, we can't, but there's always more options than we think. There's always something we can do. There's so much more in our control that we think, and also that we want to sometimes admit, because it does feel scary and it does feel hard. And especially, of course, moving can feel so scary and so overwhelming. But I really hope that you remember that it's your responsibility to make the most out of your life and design it in a way that it really fulfills you and makes you happy, even if it's scary, which it can be. But yeah, I really hope this episode inspired you or helped you. Please let me know. Let me know in the comments. I would actually love to hear 2 specific things. Either you can maybe tell me in which city you live and how you feel about living there, how you feel about the city, if you like it, what you like about it, or maybe not, where you maybe would rather live, what your dream place be to live. And then also, in terms of our mental environment, what are your favorite things to consume that you feel like really help you become who you want to be? What are podcasts or books or shows, whatever it is that comes to your mind, that you really would recommend other people to consume as well, and that you feel like really helps you grow? I mean, this is of course also super individual, right? Because we all have different goals and ambitions and dreams. But I would be so curious to hear that. And I thank you from my whole heart, as always, for listening. I can't wait to see you next week. And yeah, sending you the biggest hug. Bye.